Welcome to Modern Learning on the Air. I'm your host, David Kelly, and today we're exploring L&D outsourcing, not just whether or not we should be doing it, but how to do it well. I'm thrilled to welcome our guest for today's session, Tracie Cantu from YourCLO. With over 20 years of optimizing learning operations at companies like Meta and Atlassian, she's one of the leading voices and experts on when, why, and how L&D should outsource. Tracie, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me, David.
I'm thrilled for our conversation. I know I'm very familiar with you and the work that you do, but for those viewers who aren't as familiar with work, tell us a little bit about what you do, your history, and the type of work that you do today.
Yeah, like most people in L&D, I stumbled accidentally into it about 20 years ago. And obviously it's 20 years later and I'm still here because I found a place I loved. Today, I really help businesses run their L&D like the rest of the business. How are they going to optimize operationally and technologically that have solid business impact? I've worked in a variety of frontline industries. I started my career in commercial aviation. I've worked in insurance, retail, hospitality, government, retail healthcare, big tech. And you know what? Everybody thinks their people problems are unique, but they are not. And that is one of the greatest gifts the variety of industries has given me.
Well, and that gives us a great starting point for our conversation focused on the outsourcing strategy, when and why it works. You've worked with a lot of companies over the years, and you've seen companies that have done the full spectrum of outsourcing, from rushing into it blindly to possibly avoiding it entirely. So what have you learned through that? How does an organization help decide when it actually makes sense to consider outsourcing?
Absolutely. One of the things I always tell people is start by identifying actual constraints. One of the easy ones everybody can relate to is translation. Very
Uh-huh.
rarely do we have somebody who can speak Haitian Patois, Spanish, Arabic, Vietnamese, and can do all the translations on staff. So we're very comfortable and very used to that because it's a constraint that we know and we can acknowledge. Sometimes headcount is a constraint. Sometimes roles with heavy churn are a constraint. Speed. There are things going on in the business that, especially if you're in highly regulatory industries, that you may not have enough people on hand to maintain the business. So that's really where I tell them, like, when it makes sense, you know it because there is a constraint blocking you from delivering to the business. And you have to prioritize strategically and not just reactionary. And that's really where we begin in determining if it makes sense.
Yeah. So the constraints that we encounter in our work, sometimes they can present themselves fairly obviously. Like, a new project comes up, I'm a one-person team, and I got to scale. I just don't have that. That's a fairly obvious constraint that I'm dealing with. Sometimes they can be less obvious. Are there other types of business goals or challenges that could be a signal that maybe isn't as obvious, that you might need to bring in some external partners to help you with this?
Yeah, and it's one of the things that I think of is we usually think of outsourcing as just getting an instructional design contractor or a translation contractor, but it can go so far as an entire BPO, a business process outsource, where you hire an entire team that's managed by a vendor. And those are the ones that I think are the less obvious. For example, I see it a lot on the learning technology side and some of the larger companies, is where you have high churn roles like LMS admins, LMS support, operational analysts, coordinators. And because of that, you don't realize that the continual recruiting is draining your time and taking you away from critical work. And anytime there is vacancies, everybody else is picking up the slack. So they're doing more, but not necessarily more. So I had one team where we outsourced the entire LMS support team to a complete BPO. We had 23 contractors through that vendor that managed it. And it was fantastic because we no longer took on the burden of recruiting. We didn't have to guarantee that they were going through and maintaining certifications and training. It took a lot of stress off of us, and we had a very high quality output from it that we wouldn't have done until we actually did the analysis on how much time and money recruiting was spent on these high churn roles.
You mentioned the stress aspect of it, and I want to flip that script a little bit, because I remember one of the first times I outsourced, when I was in a very small department and we took on an acquisition. We didn't have the resources, and we needed to bring someone on. And there was a certain part of me and the other member of my team that felt a little threatened by that. That felt like it was like we weren't doing our job because we were acknowledging, we felt like there was a certain level of acknowledging, like, I can't do this. How do you handle that with a team properly?
One of the things I look back to is it's root cause of that stress. And a lot of times, I think it goes back to not robust enough processes, not a database of your intake to know that you were already operating at 120% and they had just asked you for an additional 60% because there wasn't an actual system in place to let you know when you got to those breaking points. And when I talk to folks who are in similar situations and feeling stressed, like, well, if they can outsource this, why can't they outsource me? And we talk back of like, are you just getting things off of your plate so you can do less? Or are you getting things off of your plate so you can do what you have already there? And I think that's a real critical question to have is, are you managing the critical strategy piece and you're offloading the tactical operational piece? Because you shouldn't outsource strategy, but you just have to really have those conversations and dig down into root cause as to where that stress is coming from and then quantitatively calm it.
That makes a lot of sense. And that gives us a good foundation of like where and when outsourcing can work. So coming up after this, we're going to explore how to build strong partnerships that can stay on track and align with your strategy. So stay with us. So here's a real world outsourcing scenario. It's 9 a.m., your inbox is exploding, and you're already feeling the pressure from existing project deadlines when a new project suddenly lands on your desk. Your immediate thought is, how are we possibly going to get all of this done? Well, you can get that done by handing that must-deliver training off to InSync. InSync Training's Essential Starter Bundle provides you with the team that you need, including the designer, the facilitator, and the producer. Their proven 3-step process starts by talking to you to develop an understanding of the problem. Then they'll build an engaging virtual solution. And finally, they'll pilot it or hand it off to your team to help them run it. And at the end, you receive the playbook so that you can run it on your own. And you get all of this inside 4 weeks for only $7,500. Tap the link in the show notes to learn more and book your Essential Starter Bundle today. Okay, Tracie, so once outsourcing is on the table, what are some of the key considerations to choose the right vendor to partner with?
Absolutely. Look beyond cost. There's so much more to your team and your business than just the budget. For example, if you're in a frontline industry and the vendor doesn't understand the constraints of working with frontline, then you're going to struggle communicating your project needs. I've worked with a lot of vendors who have given me amazing solutions that would have worked for office workers, but would be an utter failure for somebody on a retail floor. And that was just a no-brainer. Like, our partnership won't be successful for either of us. We can't move forward. Think about like hours of operations. If you're a global company, you need somebody who can meet the hours of operations of the team who's doing the outsourcing with the vendor, can meet language needs. And also you need folks who have strong service level agreements and SLAs and who are willing to partner with you to build strong SOPs. Because if you don't have those in place, everything is a handshake agreement and things will fall through the cracks quicker than you can imagine.
You mentioned that you don't want to just focus on who's the cheapest, but budget is a consideration at times. There are a lot of teams that might feel like they're smaller teams with limited budget. Can outsourcing still make sense in those capacities?
It absolutely can. And you can actually be creative with it. Back in my retail days, we had a university in town who had a graduate program in instructional design. We brought on interns. So outsourcing can be more than just a vendor. It can be a partnership with a local education institute or a career center in town. You can do more than that, and you can stretch your budget creatively through it. But if your conversation is we have too much on our plate and we need to outsource and we need to get 2 instructional design contractors in to help us meet these needs, budget's going to be the hardest factor. But if you come in and say, we have had 10 requests, we've had to turn down 7 of them because they all needed multimedia design. And out of those 7, 5 of them supported key like KPIs of the business for this year. So 50% of our intake we've denied, and that's KPI support because we don't have the skill set. Can we go and get When you can tie it to a business outcome, the budget gets a little more flexible because it can go under a larger project need. So I think that's another way to frame the argument is be creative and scrappy, check your educational institutes, and then actually see what you can tie to larger business KPIs in order to ride the coattails of that and maybe become a CapEx expense or be able to at least be amortized across the year versus quarter.
Yeah, and the other thing that I would add just from my own experience is, first off, the first time I actually needed to outsource, I was surprised. I had this idea of it's going to cost so much. And then the reality was the costs weren't as much as I thought they were going to be based on that. And the other thing that I've discovered is finding the right outsourcing partner, like someone who's not going to be like, just here's our cost, but what's your problem? What's your budget? And what can I do for you within that space? It's not always just a matter of this is the thing, but finding the right partner who can partner with you given your constraints can make a big difference as well.
Yes.
And having those conversations is great. So you've got your partner, you found your partner, you've got it in there. How do you ensure success when you're working with that partner, whether it be communications, quality standards, shared metrics? What are some of the things that you do to make sure that it's a strong partnership after you've decided who you're going to work with?
Absolutely. That's a great callback of making sure that your partner is actually asking smart strategic questions to you to learn more about the project. And that really helps towards aligning on a shared definition of success. You have to define it. Just saying, I want it to meet our standards and leaving it just blank is not good enough. You have to get very granular with a vendor. You have to establish your working norms. What are your cadence, your review cycles? Who's going to be the sign off? How are things going to proceed? I always love scorecards. It makes it easier and they can be done async. So that way everybody can share them. One of the things though that I tell everyone is put your expectation of standards and the metrics you'll use to determine success in the contract. Put it in the contract. So that way you can hold people accountable to if they just, something comes up and it doesn't meet. Like maybe you're not liable for 100% of the contract. You're only liable for 80%. But if you don't have that in the contract and it's just a handshake agreement once the contract's already been signed, then holding them accountable to the deliverable. I've been burnt before. We've gone through this where we received a very, very subpar product. And because the actual definition of success, the metrics we were going to use were not in the contract, it was basically just tossed out. Like we couldn't proceed forward. So it's one thing that I really do want. And I think it helps the vendor a lot too. They know what you expect going in and they know how to plan their time appropriately, deliver what you're asking for, because for the most part, nobody likes delivering an inferior product.
Sure.
So the more they know, the better they can feel and more confident in their delivery of your expectations.
I love the tip of making sure that the aspects of some of the agreements are literally written in the agreement, because that gives us a starting point. One of the things that's hard to do in there, and is a big part of what can drive partnership success, is making sure that the vendor is compatible with your culture or the systems that you might have. What are some of the ways that you vet a potential partner from that perspective, that it just fits with you culturally and the way that you operate as a department?
One of the things, though, I'm going to put my HR hat on here, is vendors and contractors aren't employees and don't have to fit culturally or meet employee behavior expectations. They do have to meet your ethics and integrity standards, and you can ask for referrals. L&D is a small community, let's be honest. I could call you up, David, and be like, hey, that Megan Torrance, how is Torrance learning? What's going on here? And everybody would be telling me like, oh, you'd be making a mistake if you passed on Megan. Like, we can do that. You can go through, get references. Every vendor I've ever worked with, I've asked them to set up 2 client referrals. I've also used staffing agencies before to actually get contractors who help me go through. And actually they help the contractor as well, because they put the contractor usually on a W-2. And so they manage payroll taxes for them, which I've heard from a lot of contract instructional designers and LMS technologists. They really like that aspect. But use all your partners, go through, but ask the same questions you would in an interview for a cultural fit. I mean, you should be interviewing your vendors just like you would interview a candidate. because you're going to have to deal with them for 90, 180, maybe the entire year. So you should ask, but you do really have to realize they are held to the same ethical and integrity standards as your employees, but that's it, because they're not employees.
And I absolutely love the suggestion of just reaching out to your network and talking to people. I mean, it is a small community. Most of the vendors that are in our space, somebody in your network probably knows of it. I mean, hell, even the conversation we're having right now, the fact that I'm hosting this podcast, when I was invited by InSync to come and do this podcast, all the conversations I've ever had about the company and the work that they do and the quality that they do was linked to my decision to come and be the host of this podcast. So you're absolutely right. If you have a need, reach out to your network, ask people. Chances are somebody can give you some good advice about the company. So that's great. We're going to take one more break. We've leveled the playing field in terms of what we're doing with partners, but now we're going to shift. When we come back from the break, we're going to go into what difference did it make? We're going to look into maintaining control and that ROI that we're always reaching for, because if you're going to outsource, somebody to get asked, did we get value for that money? So when we come back, we're going to dig into those questions a little bit more. Don't go anywhere.
You've got the knowledge, the expertise, but turning that into effective, engaging training, that's another skill entirely. At InSync Training, we take your content and transform it into learner-focused, interactive, and results-driven programs without the guesswork. Our instructional designers are experts in structuring training that's clear and engaging, designing interactive virtual, hybrid, and blended learning experiences, and developing training that sticks. So your employees don't just learn, they apply. Stop struggling with training that misses the mark. Let's design something that works. Schedule a consultation today.
Welcome back. We're going to close our conversation by exploring how we measure the impact and safeguard the quality when we're dealing with outsourcing, making sure that we're delivering upon the ROI for the resources that we're allocating to it. So Tracie, let's start there. How do we retain the quality, the brand voice, and the learner experience when some of the work that we're doing is outsourced? Where does the quality control come in?
I think this is really where we need to borrow a page out of marketing's playbook. They have brand guidelines. Straight up, you get color palettes, fonts, templates, voice, style. Do you use an Oxford comma? Do you not use an Oxford comma? We should have that as well. It's super important to have that voice. I actually worked with a peer who had it down to the Lexile level of don't write past a 7th grade level for this level of employee. Don't write past a 9th grade level for this level of employee, and gave a website as to where to go to judge that Lexile versus all of that. But we should have a full-on style guide if we're going to outsource any piece of content creation. So that way we are just doing quality checks, not full reversioning of the product we outsourced.
And I know, go ahead. Sorry,
I was also thinking it's one of those, we're all guilty of it. There are a lot of things that we know as muscle memory in our business that is only documented here. But when you start to outsource, you need SOPs. You need to outline like, hey, we have a policy that says we respond back to an email within 2 business days. And that goes for you as well when you're dealing with your SMEs and your stakeholders. We need to have those SOPs of like, this is how we do our intake process, and here's how we expect our expectations for that, because it just helps them. And our stakeholders don't care if that is a contractor or an employee. That's part of the learning team. So their behavior in interacting with our stakeholders reflects on our reputation. So not only do we want the brand and the voice to be consistent, we want their interactions within the business to be consistent with our reputation and our brand.
And when we start thinking about the value that an outsourcing project has, and in L&D we talk about ROI all the time, but I don't mean this necessarily. I think it's more important when we're dealing with outsourcing, because when you're spending external money, there tends to be more scrutiny around it. And I love what you mentioned earlier around having some teeth in the contract around the specificity of what it is that we're looking for here. So what other ways can we demonstrate that ROI? Are there metrics? Are there governance models that helps us make sure that we're keeping the partners accountable towards how we're defining ROI attached to a product?
It really goes back to the intake. Really everything in our profession goes back to the intake. We should have defined metrics at the beginning of the project. And those metrics should have been what we used to hold the team accountable and put in the contract. So if it's, we need to have, we're rolling out a new sales enablement product, and the sales team needs to be able to be up to speed on this new tool by the 13th of October. And we expect to see deal closings go up by 3%. So we hold them to the tactical measure of, did they meet the deadline? And did the instructional design quality meet the KPI metric definition of it? Like, we should put those in there, because especially hiring instructional designers, that's the difference between Bill and sales building the presentation and an instructional designer building the presentation, is they will ensure that that learning happens and we actually meet the goal of a salesperson feeling confident enough to close 3% more deals in a quarter. And we could even put it in there, like, if we actually meet this metric and we can prove it, we'll give you a 2% bonus. I've seen some bigger companies do that with their vendors. It's like, we meet the contract requirements if we hit all of our tactical goals. If we hit our KPI goals, there'll be a 2% performance bonus that we will continue on with you for. I think those are really important. If we should be holding ourselves accountable to them when we build. Why would we not hold our contractors accountable to them? Because then we go back to the business and say, I know we just spent $7,000 in 2 months for this, but here's what we got out of it. We met these deadlines, and right now we are trending to meet our 3% sales increase goals based off of this learning. So it's a two-way conversation that we can have, one with our vendor and one with our business.
It's interesting because most people who, when I hear them talk about ROI attached to learning, they tend to have this linear thing. We've got the ADDIE model that a lot of people reference around this, but it's linear. It starts at one end and it ends at the other. But you've actually kind of looped it back where we get to this ROI piece, but now we're coming back and we're linking it to the objectives that triggered the outsourcing question at the start. Is that just something that you feel like we have to be doing as an organization?
It's a business cliche, but we need to close the loop. And we often don't. We just go from start to finish. And that, did we solve the problem is where we need to come back to, not did we accomplish the task. And I think that's where we've struggled with ROI, is because we finished the task, not did we solve the problem. And if you're on an operations team, did we solve the problem? Does this new floor layout solve the efficiency problems? Like, Amazon's always investigating how to make the warehouses more efficient. Like, that's a whole team that manages that. They always go back, they iterate, are they looping through? And we just need to do it more of, did we actually solve the problem?
So before we wrap, I think a lot of times when people think of outsourcing, they think of it as this huge thing. Like, it's a major project, it's all this different stuff. And I feel like a lot of times people can get overwhelmed by the scope of something that they feel is really large. Let's bring it down to something very simple. I'm thinking I might need outsourcing. I'm not sure though. What's one piece of advice that you would give an L&D leader who's considering outsourcing in the year ahead? What's one small thing that they can do to start informing that decision?
Don't outsource confusion. Don't take a tricky problem and be like, oh, let me get somebody who can solve this. Actually know what the problem is. Understand the problem. So that way you can realistically say, yay or nay, do I have the bandwidth? Yay or nay, do I have the skill set? Yay or nay, do we have the time in our roadmap this year to actually free up space for this? Because if you're just outsourcing confusion, you're not going to get quality back. And it's not going to be the vendor's fault. It's going to be the lack of definition.
I love that. I am totally going to borrow "don't outsource confusion." I love that phrase. That's great. Tracie, I've really enjoyed chatting today. One of the reasons I love talking to people like you in the industry is how giving you are and how much you help people do their jobs better. Where can people learn more about the work that you do, connect with you if they want to learn more?
Absolutely. You can always find me on LinkedIn. Please, I will say, if you send me an inbox message, it may take a while. That's a very full inbox in there, like everybody else's LinkedIn, but please feel free to connect. Also, you can find me on YourCLO.net. That is my consulting site. You can sign up for the newsletter or just come back and stalk the website every so often to see if anything's new. But don't be afraid to reach out. And I'm I'm always available. I love talking with people. I love networking. So, and you'll also see me at conferences around. So if you see me walking through, don't be afraid to be like, hey, I saw you on a podcast. Come over here. I want to ask a few questions. I'll be like, okay. So
I highly recommend it. You've always been very giving to the field, and the personal hallway conversations I've had with you and have had you seen with other are just as insightful as the conversation we've had here. So thank you so much.
absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Oh, no problem. You've given us a clear strategy for when and where, how L&D should outsource without losing control of the quality and impact. Great insights from today's discussion, and I really, really appreciate you joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it too.
And to our listeners, if today's conversation got you thinking about skills gaps, upskilling, and how outsourcing fits into a bigger talent strategy, don't miss InSync Training's upcoming webinar on August 28th at 2 p.m. Eastern. In the webinar, you'll discover how strategic outsourcing can be your secret weapon to scale smart, speed up delivery, and boost engagement, all without sacrificing quality or control. Now remember, spots are limited, so reserve yours today at insynctraining.com/webinar. Thanks again for joining us. Be sure to subscribe to Modern Learning on the Air for more insights on how learning, leadership, and performance intersect in the modern workplace. Take care, everybody.
Thank you for tuning into Modern Learning on the Air. For all your training and services needs, visit us at insynctraining.com. And don't forget to sign up for our monthly webinars, where we cover key topics and trends in the learning and development space. Until next time, keep learning and keep growing.